Come on in, welcome to my home. Today we are going to start on my garden. And why I use air quotes for garden is simply because I live in a condo. My mom is my next door neighbor. Her condo's over on that side. I'm right here. And well, when you live in a condo, you kind of have some restrictions on what you can do when you garden. And we have restrictions. The one thing that you should know going into this is I'm not really a flower person. I've never really been a flower person. My mom likes flowers. So that's where things get a little different. So let's talk about our restrictions to begin with. In my place, I don't have that much space to actually garden, because there are already some plants that are set out there by the homeowners association or the association that takes care of the grounds, and I can't really do much with those, and they are fairly big plants. They're bushes and those sort of things. And then also, for whatever odd reason, I decided I'd have to have some mint and some lemon balm out there. They're everywhere, so they take over everything. I weed them constantly, but they're still out there. Now, on Mom's side, it's a little different. On her side, she does have some roses up by her porch, and also there's a lot of space, whereas I don't have that. So we knew that going into this would be a great spot to do things. Now, these buildings have been up here for quite a few years. I think about 12 years now, and they really haven't been planted, and I sort of understand why. When the buildings were originally put down, the mulch around the buildings was just wood mulch. And there were problems, it had some problems, so they changed it to rock mulch, which is, I personally like the rock mulch. We have neighbors that don't. I don't know if you'd call it rock mulch. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. We have neighbors who don't like it, but I personally like it. But it did lead to some problems and led to one of my new discoveries. Now, I have planted this before, but for whatever reason, I either didn't remember or something along those lines, because, well, let's get into this. Alright, so the first thing that I did was I tackled my porch first, because my porch is more about herbs and also vegetables. Now, when it came to vegetables this year, I knew that the one main one that I wanted to grow, in fact the only one that I'm growing right now, are tomatoes. I have a Roma tomato and a cherry tomato. Pretty cool. Now, one of the things that I did not do, and I think it's something that you have to really consider, you hear a lot about people saying you need to replace your soil each year because your soil gets depleted of nutrients and that sort of thing, and that's really true. The problem is when you live in an apartment or a condo or even have a limited budget, that might not be possible. Like, to replace the soil in all the containers would be ridiculously expensive right now. So instead, this year I use a Spoma garden tone and a Spoma plant tone. I use the garden tone mainly in the containers that I knew that there would be vegetables in. It is a fertilizer which will help revitalize the nutrients in the soil, so I mixed that in there and then also mixed it in when I was put it in when I was putting in the plants. It's something to consider. Now, right now, I did wait until we were as close to possible as our last frost. Where I live, our last frost is about May 24th. About then. So I waited. It's been really warm, so no real problems there. And I had grandiose ideas of all the things that I was going to buy and get, because like I said, I knew the tomatoes were going to go. But my grandiose ideas was going to get all sorts of flowers and that sort of thing until I went to look for these things, and I looked at the price and I looked at, well, the availability and what actually was happening in the stores. One of the things that I knew going into this was a lot of people are landscaping, and I'm all for that. That's great, looks wonderful, but there is a problem. The problem with everybody landscaping right now is availability. The number and the kinds of plants that were available was greatly limited. And then the next problem came up, which I had not planned on, which was the fact that a lot of the stores that I had available to me, they didn't take care of their plants. Some of the plants looked really, really bad. I'm not here to say that those stores are good, those stores are bad. I'm just telling you that it was a problem. It was a big problem. It looked like some of these things had not been watered, and I sort of know why, sort of don't know why. I mean, we've had a lot of rain. In fact, that's why this video got pushed back, because it has rained quite a bit. And so I would have thought that, you know, plants would want the water, but either the plants got too much water or they didn't get enough water. Either way, the plants did not look great. So picking through plants was an issue. Then also the kinds of plants, well, that was this whole other issue. But I knew going into this, I knew that I would do Superbells, Petunias, and then some Petunias and lavender. I wanted the lavender outside Mom's window because it'll have a nice scent, and it's a perennial because she really wanted perennials, and I'm like, okay, we can do perennials, however you're going to want the instant thing, so anyway. Then also one of my favorite things to plant is a sweet potato vine, because I love the color of sweet potato vines, and I got a black sweet potato vine which just looks really, really cool. I will list all the plants that I have down below in the description, and probably throw up their name onto the picture as I'm planting them. But let's start off this. Now, planting the plants into my containers was so simple. So what we found out, and I'd either forgotten this or it wasn't as, oh, that's what it is. I don't think I'd planted in front of Mom's house before. So what I found out is that there's landscape fabric underneath the rocks. No problem, I was expecting that. But the landscape fabric was ridiculous. I mean, it was absolutely nearly impossible to get through, and then the soil, which I use that term loosely, underneath the landscape fabric was hard pan. It was almost impossible to actually get down into the soil in any way, shape, or form. Now, next year, if I do this, which I probably will, I'm planning on getting an auger, but we'll go into that next year when we get that, so hopefully it'll make it easier. But this year I had to use a shovel and then a little garden shovel, and it was super hard. Those things were not going in no matter what. So, change of plan. A lot of the plants, I'd bought more plants than what I needed to, I knew to begin with. But I had planned on putting more of those out into Mom's landscape, more of the Petunias and the Supertunias and the Superbells out into her landscape, but yet I realized going into this really quickly, not going to happen. That wasn't going to happen whatsoever. So instead, I packed her planter boxes, which are just recycling. Our recycling used to be done in plastic containers. When they changed to the big upright, like, trash containers for recycling, they just basically had us keep the recycling containers. Cool. I turned mine into planters, and now I plant in those, and it's really, really cool. I mean, like, I can plant, I filled them up with soil, added my added my plant tone for those. Plant tone is more for your flowers, shrubs, those sort of things, so that way I could mix this plant tone in there. And then, as I did each hole, I would then fill the hole with plant tone, not fill it, but put plant tone in the hole, put the plant in, pack in around it, and I knew that I'm going to top it up with compost. I'd like to get the Land and Sea compost, and they're out, the stores are out of it. So that's going to have to wait, you won't see that in this video. But instead, I just planted them as deep as I could, and also filled them back in, did all those fun things, and it looks kind of neat. I actually like it. What's really interesting is how quickly the plants are adapting and thriving. I was surprised by that. I know that my sweet potato vines and the Superbells, Supertunias, I also did the Wave, which is supposed to also produce lots and lots of petunia flowers. Those are going to look really nice, and they're going to spread really fast, and what I want to have happen is I want those to cascade over the boxes, hiding the red container completely. That's the goal. The goal is to have it so that I don't mind cutting the plants back so that way they look good. They look really wonderful. I know each year I'm going to have to each month I'm going to have to feed the plants. Now, going into this, you really need to know something. I am not a garden expert. I am learning as I go along, so if you have any tips, feel free to give me tips down below in those comments. But the things that I do know is, like, the plants in my porch face south. So I face south, Mom faces west. She gets the blazing hot sun in the evening, I get the blazing hot sun almost all day. And that was a big issue because shade plants were just not going to work. So these are sun-loving plants. They're plants that I enjoy, and I knew that they were flowers that would be really easy to take care of because the next issue is water. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about water because you have to wait till next week's episode. There is a water surprise, but we'll get to that. So once I got the plants into the containers, I like them. I like them a lot, simply because these are going to be really easy to grow. The Superbells and Petunias by Proven Winners just go everywhere. They give you lots and lots of flowers. Now, I did use these I did the idea behind the colors. That was all picked by Mom. Mom wanted pink, fuchsia, purple, and just a hint of yellow, which I thought was okay, cool, wonderful. So I did pick those colors out because her roses are red. And her roses, it's its own issue. But some of her roses have been cut down too far, so the wild roses are coming out, but they're doing okay. But this had to be something that I knew that she could easily take care of if she wanted to, or she could completely ignore it and just let the plants flourish and go, and that was the whole point. I didn't want her to have to go out there and water them all the time, prune them all the time, deadhead them all the time. I can do that for her when I remember it, or if I don't remember it, it still will look alright because of the profusion of flowers. That's the big thing to remember, is think about what you have time for and what you don't have time for. I have the time to go do the pruning if I need to. If I don't want to, they can just cascade. The planter, which is on her table, she can do that without having to crawl down on the ground and prune that, so that's no problem. The one thing that I will tell you is you really want the equipment to do this. Had I had the auger, it would have made life a whole lot easier to then plant the plants further out into the grass, or further out into the planting bed, but I didn't. So I'm going to go this year small. I'm going to go with what I know and what I can do. That's the big thing. Do your research on these things to see what plants grow well in your area. I know that I'm going to have to be feeding these at least once a month, and I do have the plant food for that. I will probably stick with the plant tone and then the garden tone, and we'll go from there. Now, if you want to keep up with how these plants are doing, follow me on Instagram, because on Instagram I will be posting pictures of how the plants are going, and you can see what's happening, what's working, what's not working. But you're also going to get to see next week's video is what I'm going to do about the water situation, because the water situation is an issue. What was really funny about this is, as I was trying to water these, to water Mom's porch, her garden hose is actually all the way around towards her driveway, and it has to go, the hose bib has to go all the way around to the front. It was a whole issue. Mine is over in the corner, much easier, but I know there has to be another solution, and there is. The other thing which you'll notice is my porch is a mess, and I mean an absolute mess, because I knew I wasn't going to clean it until after I figured out and sorted out all of the planting and everything, because I kicked up a lot of dirt, and I mean a lot of dirt, onto the porch, onto everything. So now that everything is planted, I can then go clean off the porch, and then I will then do the porch video, where I will make my porch look more pretty and those sort of things. Like I said, this video is all about learning. It's what I did. I am not a garden expert. These are plants that you can do. They grow really easily, really wonderful in my area. Your area might be a little bit different, and I'd like to hear about that. I'd like to know what plants work for you, what plants I should be on the lookout for, and we'll see how this whole thing goes. I'd like to take this time to thank these wonderful patrons who help keep this channel going and all those wonderful things, because without them, this channel probably would be a little bit slower. But The cool thing about this is if you want to join Patreon, we do have discussions. This is going to be a really fun thing, especially as the plants start growing. And you're going to get to see, later on in the year, you'll get to see my indoor plants, because the reason I did these plants, I have this wonderful aloe that seems to just love its life. And it does really well. And also my pothos that's in my bedroom, it loves its life too. So those are the two plants that I have growing. I know that I can grow plants. We're going to see how this one goes. I hope you enjoyed this. Remember to like and subscribe. Share this video. It does help the YouTube algorithms know that you want to see more videos like this. If you have plant questions, maybe I can answer them. Maybe I can point you in the right direction. Just let me know down in the comments. I hope I get to see you again the next time you stop by.